More than 2 years na in COVID-19 pandemic, and sabi nila wala na raw peligro ngayon yung COVID-19. Kahit meron pang mag-positive, it is mostly limited sa very mild symptoms. Thank God, finally, at least nagkakaroon na tayo ng nakikita nating immunity. It is herd immunity coming from both genetic exposure or generic exposure rather, na halos lahat tayo ngayon ay exposed na sa virus, and at the same time, marami na rin yung vaccinated. So we are very happy and thankful na ngayon hindi na major problems yung pandemic dulot ng COVID. However, meron palang pandemic na mas matagal na kaysa sa COVID. Before pa nagkaroon ng COVID, marami nang nagkakasakit, na ospital, nagiging bedridden, at yung iba nga namamatay because of this pandemic na hindi natin nakita noon. And now na wala ng COVID, still, they are still the same patients na nagdo-dominate ng karamihan sa ating mga ospital. Ngayon, yung mga COVID na beds are no longer saturated, kakaunti na lang. And sadly, kung meron mang mga nagiging malala pa rin with this virus, these are also the same patients na kasama sa previous pandemic na hindi natin napag-uusapan before. And that is what we call as diabesity pandemic. So diabesity pandemic is coined from two words, diabetes and obesity. So they are grouped as one because usually spectrum sila. And their root cause, yung kanilang pinaka-ugat, pinagsisimulan is the presence of insulin resistance. So yung insulin resistance is when your body is no longer normally responding to insulin, because insulin supposedly enough siya to regulate our body. Tama lang na merong papasok na blood sugar sa atin, na blood sugar coming to our cells, and at the same time, this sugar will be metabolized in the form of energy, or it can eventually accumulate as fats until makaya ng katawan to store those fats. However, those fat storage, meron ding limit at iba-iba yan sa kada tao. May mga taong hindi talaga fat formers. So their capacity to store fats is low. So hindi sila nagiging obese, hindi sila nagiging overweight. Ito yung mga taong makikita nating payat at hindi lumalaki kahit gano'n na karami yung kinakain nilang only rice. Meron namang mga tao na fat formers, na even a little that they eat, extra foods that they eat, tumataba talaga, nagbo-bloat talaga. And both group of people are actually not exempted in developing diabetes. We can see certain groups na matataba pero hindi diabetic. However, meron namang mga payat pero diabetic. Meron ngang iba na very athletic. For the longest time, hindi nagbago ng kanilang pagkain. They're very physically active. They are running, they are biking, they are physically very fit. However, comes age late 30s, early 40s, dun na, when they are already requested for their routine laboratory exam, annual PE, annual check-up sa kanilang mga clinics, sa kanilang mga trabaho, doon na nila nakita na meron silang diabetes or pre-diabetes. The burden of diabetes care in the Philippines is hindi ganon ka-easy. Okay? So, when research found out na yung struggle pala ng mga Filipinos with diabetes is sobra-sobra. This is because wala tayong ganong kagandang resources. Our healthcare is actually not covering up so much on prevention, and we don't have medical support since marami din sa mga Filipinos ay wala ring medical insurance. But one of the major reasons also why diabetes is becoming a worse problem over the years in Asians, especially Filipinos, is our food intake. Because our food intake, for the longest time, it's mostly composed of rice. And rice is a form of starch, and starch is just a solid kind of glucose na kapag ito ay na-breakdown, it would still become glucose, at ito ay makakapagpataas pa rin ng ating blood sugar, and this chronic parating pagtaas ng blood sugar is the primary cause kung bakit nagkakaroon ng insulin resistance. And based on 2008 study, one in every six Filipinos, isa sa bawat anim na Pinoy ay merong diabetes or pre-diabetes. And it's consistently increasing. Now, it is postulated na isa hanggang dalawang Pinoy for every six Filipinos ay merong diabetes or pre-diabetes. If you are six in the family and all of you are adults, most likely merong isa o dalawa sa inyo yung meron ng diabetes or pre-diabetes. And the worst part of this is 9 out of 10 na mga taong merong pre-diabetes ay hindi nila alam na meron na silang ganito. Because when they had their laboratories checked, yung FBS nila is normal naman and hindi naman sila mataba. And mostly nakikita na hindi talaga sila yung typical na diabetic picture. But how can you suspect na pwede na pala kayong pre-diabetic? So pre-diabetic, it is already a start of insulin resistance. So if you have been doing the same thing for so many years, same physical activity, same food intake, and then wala rin nagbago sa inyong lifestyle, but you are already seeing changes, especially sa inyong body weight and also sa mga hindi tumataba, try to look at your abdominal girth, kung gaano kalaki yung tiyan. If your abdomen is already enlarging, kung lumalaki na yung tiyan, especially sa mga lalaki or sa mga kahit sa mga babae na hindi tumataba, pero yung tiyan ay lumalaki lang ng lumalaki, try to look into that. If your abdominal girth o yung inyong waistline ay more than 1/2 na of your height, so if your height is 5, for example, that is 60 inches, tapos yung inyong waistline sa level ng inyong pusod ay more than 30 na, then that could be a sign that you are already having some degree of insulin resistance. And that is obesity on central part. So obesity can be peripheral obesity and central obesity. Peripheral obesity, ito yung nakikitang malalaki yung braso, malalaki yung paa, pero yung pinakadelikadong klase ng obesity actually is the obesity of central origin or central in location. And that is those people who are having enlarged stomach, enlarged abdomen. It has greater risk and greater significance sa pagkakaroon ng risk of developing cardiovascular diseases, sakit sa puso, pagkakaroon ng stroke, or pagkakaroon ng heart attack. And that is why we have to limit that because walang ibang mag-aalaga sa atin but tayo lang din. And it's not an excuse na just because you have a good insurance coverage, you have a medical support, you are already free to have diabetes because diabetes, it is not just about the financial burden. Hindi lang yan dahil sa magastos magkaroon ng diabetes o merong iinuming gamot, but it's your overall quality of life. Maraming mga bagay na hindi mo na ma-enjoy. And then these medications are also not without side effects. These medications are all synthetic and as much as possible, kung pwede natin silang maiwasan, it is best if we can avoid them. And this is the time wherein there is no better time to start our preventive measures because as always, yung ating dictum talaga is prevention is better than cure. At paano natin ma-prevent ito? And we can actually easily do this by looking into our food intake. This is especially made for those who are not really fat to begin with. Kasi akala natin before yung mga matataba lang, yung at risk of diabetes, of illness. But sa totoo lang, those people who are fat formers are actually somewhat luckier a little as compared sa mga non-fat formers, provided that they are eating the same things. If pareho silang kumakain ng sobrang daming sugar and sobrang daming fats together with those sugar and kumakain ng mga carbs, pero yung isang tao hindi tumataba at yung isa naman ay tumataba, actually makikita mo na metabolically speaking, yung taong hindi tumataba might actually have greater risk of developing serious illness kasi hindi obvious yung damage, yung effect ng insulin resistance, ng inflammation, may be so subtle, hindi obvious na as compared to someone who is gaining weight easily, yung tumataba. Because the effect of insulin when stimulated too much, it is an anabolic hormone. Hindi lang po dahil sa pagtaas ng blood sugar, hindi lang siya sa pagtaas ng taba sa katawan, but it is also an anabolic hormone that can lead into tumor formation, pagkakaroon ng autoimmune diseases, pagkakaroon ng fatty liver, pagtaas ng ating visceral fats. For females, it is also seen na females with metabolic syndrome, merong dyslipidemia, pagtaas ng mga bad cholesterol, will also have greater risk of developing tumors in their ovaries, in their uterus, or in their breast. So, kailangan talaga we have to avoid that. So, ano yung tamang pagkain upang maiwasan ito? So, first, of course, we have to emphasize na we really have to avoid the processed foods, especially processed foods loaded with sugar. So, whenever we say sugar, hindi lang ito yung asukal na puti. It also includes brown sugar. It also includes muscovado at kahit pa cocoa sugar. Coconut sugar is considered as low glycemic index because it is low in glucose. But what is not known is it's actually high in fructose. At yung mataas na fructose component when consumed over time, when accumulated, can still be as equally, if not more damaging, especially sa ating liver because fructose is metabolized in our liver at kapag parati itong nasi-stimulate and you are eating also many other foods together with that, together with fatty foods, together with even red meat na supposedly hindi naman sana nakakasama sa atin, but if we are taking them all together, kinakain natin sila ng sabay-sabay in unlimited basis, and together with other sweets like soft drinks, yung mga desserts, yung mga chicheria, and even those that are considered as hindi matamis, matatabang, like yung mga crackers or tinapay, pandesal, those foods are actually still going to increase your blood sugar and will still increase your developing insulin resistance. So, if you already been avoiding these desserts, kung nag-a-avoid na kayo ng mga matatamis na pagkain, hindi na kayo soft drinks, hindi na kayo nag-fruit juices, hindi na rin kayo kumakain ng mga chicheria, but still you feel that you are having this possibility of developing pre-diabetes, then you can now look into your starch intake. So starch intake can include your rice. If you are eating more than 1 cup of rice in a day, try to lessen that, at least slowly if you can't do it all at once. And then in addition to rice, you can also think of your other starch intake like patatas or kamote or other root crops, and also even some vegetables like munggo, beans, those can still also be high in starch. But of course, unahin nyo munang kunin yung mga high in carbohydrates, high in simple sugars. And if you are not successful with making your health 100% normal, 100% good, then you can look into your starch intake. In addition to that, you can also look into your seed oil intake. Kung gumagamit kayo ng mantika, pamprito sa bahay, try to look into the kind of oil that you are using. If you can use coconut oil, all the better. And try to limit that to coconut oil. I know medyo mahirap makahanap ng lard or tallow o yung taba ng baboy at taba ng baka to be used as cooking oil. It may be a little challenging. And for other oil needs, you can also use extra virgin olive oil. For us here in the Philippines, medyo pricey siya, but nothing is expensive when it comes to your health. And don't worry, if ever naman wala, then you can just eliminate that. You can just focus in other sources of good fats like avocado and itlog, and also the fats that are in animal fats, if you are not vegan or vegetarian, are also good in our body as long as kapag kinain natin ito, try to make sure that you are eating them without those scary foods that will spike our blood sugar, our insulin in the body. At yun yung mga processed foods. And if you've been avoiding all of that and still hindi pa rin ma-correct yung inyong pagkaroon ng normal blood sugar and also no signs of inflammation, then you can also try to look into your fruit intake, especially sa mga lugar na kung saan sobrang abundant yung fruit all year round, halos libre, pinamimigay lang. In especially in Mindanao. I've been to Mindanao late last year at nakita ko nga doon, fruits are everywhere. And yes, they can be a part of a healthy diet, but only if they are eaten in small quantities at paminsan-minsan lang and not being eaten together with other foods na ating pinagbabawal. Kung kumakain kayo ng prutas pero nagsosoft drinks pa rin kayo and nagkakakain pa rin kayo ng kanin and other starch, or even if you are consuming mostly fruits pero kung sobra-sobra din yung quantity nito, nauubos mo yung 1 kilo ng saging, 1 kilo ng mangga, isang buong watermelon, or whatever fruits that you have there, then it can still be too much. And fruits are mostly, kapag pinipili pa natin yung pinakamatamis, then it's very high in glucose and fructose, and that can still be a cause of problem. So, of course, if you try to eliminate what foods to eat, try to start first with the processed foods, and after that one, the sweet foods, the ones loaded with sugar, with fructose. And next, you can check at your starch intake, which would include sa Filipinos, pinaka-common would be rice and pandesal and tinapay, at saka yung mga noodles and pasta. And also, you can look into your seed oils kasi yung seed oils, kahit pa hindi sila carbs, but they are very bad oils that they will induce inflammation, pamamaga sa ating atay. And these pamamaga ay magkaka-result into insulin resistance in our body. And lastly, if it's still not perfect, then you can look into your overall fruit intake. Baka lang nasusobrahan ito. And if ever you already avoided that, you can focus on the foods that you can eat. So you can focus on real foods. You can check on natural proteins. Seafoods are great sources of proteins. Carne, isda. So we also have eggs and chicken. Mostly these are really good sources of proteins na kailangan natin at hindi natin kailangan katakutan as long as we know which foods to avoid. Proteins and together with the natural fats embedded in it, like yung natural na kasama na taba nito, like sa crabs or in other seafoods, those are natural fats and natural proteins na pwede nating makonsume that is actually very good for us as long as we know what to eat it together with. And the best pair, kung hindi nyo kayang kumain ng puro ulam lamang, would be eating it together with vegetables. So green leafy vegetables, non-starchy vegetables tulad ng talong, okra, and then you can also have ampalaya, and then lahat ng talbos ng mga dahon ng mga talbos, and then you can also have some tomato, some cucumber, pepino, and you can also have some onions. Wag lang sobra-sobra. Wag kumain ng isang buong or dalawang buong onion in a day because that is also high in sugar. So, focus on the foods that you like that are in our safe list and try to be creative sa paggawa ng iba't ibang menu when it comes to eating right so that we will avoid. Congratulations to everyone and to all of us who are still surviving after more than 2 years of this pandemic. But we have to be more mindful na hindi lang yung viral na pandemic, hindi lang yung virus na pandemic yung kailangan natin i-survive, but also the pandemic that's been plaguing the world for decades now, secretly, and is still killing millions of people all over the world. For those who are going to laboratories to their checkup, I suggest na instead of just FBS, you can actually request for HbA1c para makita, mas madaling ma-detect if meron kayong possible diabetes or pre-diabetes. And also, you can also look into your blood pressure, magpo-monitor ng blood pressure. Remember na ang normal na blood pressure ay less than 120/80. If your blood pressure is 120/90, that is already considered as hypertension. If it's 130/80, mataas pa rin yan. So, that is still considered hypertension. 140/90 is not normal. Normal blood pressure is 120/80 and or over 80 yan. So, kahit pa mababa yung systolic, yung sa itaas na number, pero mataas yung diastolic, yung sa ibaba na number, that is still considered as hypertension. And hypertension may be a representation of inflammation sa katawan. That could still be related to insulin resistance na pwedeng makita sa mga taong hindi man tumataba at hindi man nagkakaroon ng diabetes, ng pagtaas ng blood sugar, but this inflammation can present as elevated blood pressure na kailangan din natin ma-normalize. And also for those with urinalysis, try to look into your proteins, level of proteins in your urine. It should be 0. And as much as possible, dapat wala yung +1, +2, or +3 because having proteins in your urine can already signify na baka meron ng concurrent or already happening na kidney damage. So I think that's it for today. I'll see you in our next video. I still have to go to work and maraming salamat for waking up early with me today. And I'll see you next time in our next videos. Maraming salamat everyone. Remember to always stay low carb so that we all stay safe. Have a good day. Have a great weekend.